From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what we are working on for you over the next 60 minutes. The bears are out in full force. Our roundtables tell us if now crop prices have maybe gone too low. Weather has been a wet blanket on the market, so what's in store over the next week? The New York dairy industry is at odds with the governor over unionizing.
We don't get to choose how much we're paid for our milk.
Our Farm Journal report shows us the labor battle that dairy farmers say is a losing one. And in John's world,
why are small banks disappearing?
U.S. Farm Report, brought to you by the dependable, long-lasting Chevy Silverado.
Now for the news that moved the markets this week. Fireworks continued after reopening from the holiday break, sending soybeans $1 lower in only a few days. All eyes are on weather, and now worries of La Nina plaguing the crop in July are easing. A more favorable forecast transpired over the weekend, sending managed money on a selling fury. The 6 to 10 day forecast this week showed warm temperatures, but much of the Corn Belt receiving rain, also putting a damper on prices. In response, commodity prices taking a hard fall this week. Well, it's not rosy everywhere when it comes to rain. The latest drought monitor showing pockets of the country in desperate need of moisture. Check out Michigan, the area considered abnormally dry, jumping up 37 points in just a week, and moderate drought climbing 16 points. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey tells us 66% of the state's topsoil moisture was considered short to very short on July 3rd. Meanwhile, moving west, the drought monitor showing slight improvements in Iowa's drought conditions, but extreme drought continues in South Dakota and Wyoming. And looking at the southeast, extreme conditions are spreading across Alabama and Georgia, now growing into South Carolina. Corn crop conditions were unchanged this week. 75% is still good to excellent. USDA says Wisconsin is the garden spot with 85% in the top categories. 15% of the nation's corn crop is tasseling. That's 2 points ahead of average. And nearly 60% of Missouri corn has silked, double the 5-year average. Soybean conditions starting to worsen with a 2-point drop this week. 70% is still considered good to excellent. And winter wheat harvest reaching 58% this week. That's 3 points ahead of average. Texas and Oklahoma are nearly complete. Down in Brazil, prospects of the Safrinha corn crop aren't looking so good thanks to drought. The country's National Crop Supply Agency slashing their forecast by nearly 7 million tons this week. They now peg the second crop corn production at just over 43 million tons. Ethanol exports falling to a 9-month low in May at 55.7 million gallons. That's a 42% drop from April and marks only the second monthly drop in 2 years. The top destination in May was Canada, displacing China for the #1 spot. Those two countries made up roughly 75% of export buys for ethanol. But DDGs saw a 20% growth, mainly to China. Meat exports took the opposite path in May with double-digit gains from the previous year. The U.S. Meat Export Federation shows beef exports shot up 12% and pork up 8%. Looking at beef, the Federation says Japan exports were the largest in nearly 2 years, and shipments to South Korea were up 59% from last May. Crop protection services could be growing. That's as Cargill is selling off its retail farm stores across the United States to Agrium, the parent company of CPS. The 18 stores are located in 6 states across the Corn Belt. The Agrium deal is the latest in 9 other divestments by Cargill in just the past 2 years. Agrium is the largest U.S. farm retailer and says this helps achieve their goal of growing their North American retail business. And continuing our merger news, a $10 billion milk merger is in the works. French dairy giant Dannon announcing it's buying White Wave Foods. That's the company that makes the popular Silk soy milk. The acquisition will double the size of Dannon's U.S. business, which already sells popular brands like Activia, Oikos, and Dannon yogurts. The deal is expected to close by the end of the year once all regulatory hurdles are crossed. All right, those are the headlines. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us now with weather. Mike, I know you said last week you didn't expect widespread drought, but some places just keep getting drier.
Well, that's right, Tyne. There's no widespread area of drought developing, but there are pockets, and these are areas that have just been missed by the areas of showers and thunderstorms and complexes that we've seen. Now, there is still that area over the southeast, centered around Atlanta. That's been getting worse and worse, and that's an area that we do have to watch, maybe expanding. But you can see otherwise it's some spots in Michigan, parts of the northeast, Iowa-Missouri border, a few spots around South Dakota, and a spot in central portions of Oklahoma seeing moderate drought. We still have to be concerned about these areas, but at this point it's not a widespread situation. And you can see as we go past the last month, things have been expanding, but not dramatically over the Corn Belt in the southeast. Again, that area hasn't really been expanding, but it has been getting worse in some spots. All right, let's go day by day this week. You can still see a stationary front in the southeast, so that at least gives some areas some needed moisture in parts of Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, into Florida. Next storm system is going to be very slow moving. Low pressure up along the Canadian border, cold front southward. Those will be the areas of showers and storms. You can see it only moves a couple of states by Wednesday over into the western lakes, down into Oklahoma and Texas with scattered showers and thunderstorms. It's very warm and humid to the east of it. It's a little bit cooler back behind this storm system. And even by Friday, we're still dealing with it northeast of the Great Lakes with that front down through the southern plains with scattered showers and thunderstorms. Back in our next half hour with a longer range forecast.
Thanks, Mike. Well, there's no shortage of topics to talk about in this week's roundtables. Andy Schisler and Bob Utterback join you next.
This is Machinery Pete, inviting you to check out my new website, machinerypete.com, offering farmers tens of thousands of used equipment listings to search. Let Machinery Pete help you find and value your next piece of used equipment.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. On the roundtables with me this week, we have Bob Utterback of Utterback Marketing and Andy Schisler of S&W Trading. Plenty to talk about this week. Not a great week for the markets. Bob, let's start with you.
It was a great week.
Well, at this point, though, are we priced too low in the corn market?
I think when December corn got down to $3.50, I think we exceeded downside expectations a little too much. It was a panic bottom, and I think we're bouncing back from it. The big question is the corn-bean ratios now. Are we going into a new paradigm where it's going to be 3-to-1, or is it, we're going to go back to the old 2-to-1? I think beans is a more dangerous commodity right now. What is fair value for beans? Corn at $3.50 is a little too cheap this early, but $4 cash, which everybody wants, is going to be a tough one to get.
So if we have gone too low in this corn market, Andy, then how do we push prices higher? What factors do we need to weigh in?
Well, I think we built our big rally, and you had probably one of the better weather buildups I've seen in many, many years, off of something that could possibly have happened. Like the whole La Nina press was just something. I think next year, everybody that bought it for the La Nina, it takes time to transition into that. And I think that's what's going to happen. So I think they'll buy ownership from farmers at lower prices. I think there's a chance it can trade back towards $4, like a 50-cent rally off of August weather. Maybe it's dry and hot. I think that's a possibility. But longer term, I think you're going way out again. I had to wait a year to market crop again, like year to year, to market substantial portions of grain. I really didn't want to do that again, but it looks like that's where we're headed.
Yeah, so Bob, I know you're in that same camp. You're thinking if farmers can store corn right now, that's probably what they need to do this fall, you think?
Yeah, I think we're to a point, farmers are not going to sell corn this cheap because it's at or below their cost of production. Mm-hmm. We was talking about, I think El Nino, I think we're setting up for a dry fall. Mother Nature has a way of going from one extreme to another.
Right.
And I would argue the next time we get corn, if we have a dry fall, dry winter, we get to next spring and everything gets planted. The next time corn gets to $4.50, I think farmers will sell it because the banks will require it. And that's going to be the trap, because the next time we get short $4.50 and farmers have moved it, then all hands on board if we have a weather scare next year.
But you don't think we'll get to that $4.50 mark until next year?
It's next year. Yeah, I think it's gone for this year.
In short term, though, do you think we could even get to $4 at this point, Andy?
I think it's possible because they seem to buy the heat, and these algo traders, it's nothing like I've seen before, where they just buy whatever it is, whether it's stocks or cattle, push cattle down or push beans up. Like we went to $12 with the 360 carryout, and we couldn't hit 1040 for one day last year with a lot smaller stocks and less prospects and less acres. And so there's another dynamic in here that when you're hedging stuff and you think 10.50 is a good price and they put it to 12 on you, it doesn't feel real good. I've personally experienced some of that, and it's amazing. So the dynamics are one that a weather shift could put corn up to a number that you could pre-sell some stuff for fall. I mean, it's very possible.
You mentioned off camera that because of this managed money and we see this volatility, this huge volatility, that maybe that's the new normal. We go too high, we go too low, and that's just what happens?
I really do. I think this is what we've seen this year, and with electronic trading and a lot of, I think we're seeing a whole new wave of volatility, which means as a producer, you've got to insulate yourself against that, because the emotions of producers can't sell supply-driven bull markets. It's very difficult for a farmer to pull the plug when his corn is wilting out in the field or curling. He can't sell corn when it's wilting. And so you're going to have to give yourself a mechanism, and I think it's the call mechanism against the cash sale. And that means here, that's the real opportunity coming in here, September, October. If we get a good fall low, I think you got to think how you're going to sell next spring. You got to get thinking about next year. And I think a lot of guys are worrying about, well, I got corn in the bin I haven't sold last year. And that's the real dilemma, I think, coming up too.
You know, Brazil, they cut the expectations on that safrinha crop down in Brazil. Why didn't we automatically see a boost in prices on Thursday? It took until Friday for it to impact the market. Why?
Because we're record long beans and everything turned lower, and they finally got in a bad position and they unloaded. So we traded 60 some lower, then we traded 10 lower, then we traded 50 some lower, and it was a bean thing. You're not going to rally corn. The fact that it held unchanged on the day told me we were going to be up today. And that heat, you actually broke beans on bearish news. So that's important too.
All right, well, we've only talked corn, but we've got to talk soybeans. We need to talk wheat, China, a lot of stuff to cover that we're going to do in the next marketing roundtable. The pressure's on. So stay with us. We'll do that when we come back. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. All right, let's switch gears over to soybeans a little bit. Saw a major correction in prices this week. Andy, do you think that there's more room to go lower in this bean market?
Well, I think there is, just because the funds are very long. So you look at what corn did, we traded new lows for the year. Wheat did the same thing, substantially did the same thing. So you got a lot of that product stacked up, and you've got the beans you could add next to it. They want to make sure they make the crop because the acres weren't quite enough to seal the deal that beans were done. And so we've got a heat system coming in. If they put a rain after that heat system, then I think beans could go down towards like 9.15 on the board. But if it stays dry, there's a gap at 11.20 we could go run at, but I don't know that we exceed $12 unless it's really dry.
Now, I know in the spring rally we sold a lot more beans than we did corn, but anybody that still has soybeans, old crop soybeans in their possession, or looking forward to the new crop year, what should they be doing right now?
Get the calendar out, next 4 weeks, sell 1/4 every week, every Friday.
Oh, so get rid of it.
Get rid of it. You get rid of it because the acres are there, and it's all weather now.
Okay, so it's just weather right now weighing on
weather.
prices. Okay.
And if corn stays between 4 and 350, and we keep the ratios between 2.5, 2.7, the $9 beans is your risk. So if you can get to 11, 20, I think you got to. And if you can't sell the cash on new crop corn, then, and you can't sell the board, then put some type of put, vertical buy a put, sell a put, but at least get something down, protect yourself, because I think beans will realign itself with corn.
Andy, next week we do have a WASDE report coming out. Could that provide any bit of boost for prices, or is trade expecting that to be bearish?
Well, it's going to be probably bearish corn, so they'll try to up the demand, but what they found was they found a couple 100 million extra bushels on the last stocks reports. They'll want to try to add that in somewhere, then the acres bump up a little bit, so you stay over 2 billion using a pretty decent trendline yield. And then so beans, they found a little bit of beans. The demand probably picks up a little bit on the export side to cancel that out. And so the bean number is going to be pretty normal, and I think on the mark. It will be a little friendly on the bean number, and then what they'll look at is what the acres plug in, but they're already using really high demand, so it should be 3.25 on the new crop carryout, I would think, for soybeans, which is not crazy bullish, but with weather it would be.
Okay. On the wheat side of things, hearing about great yields out in the plains. South America now saying because we're shifting away from El Nino into La Nina, possibly boosting the wheat production there. We have a lot of wheat in this world. What do you think is going to happen with prices?
If you're a commercial operator and you got a grain bin that has wheat and you're in your corn production, wheat right now is paying you over 50 cents to store wheat from now to next May. Corn's paying you 25 cents to store corn from now. So they're going to fill up with beans, the wheat, and sell the carry. So that's going to put pressure on corn. So if the corn doesn't have a problem, corn is going to have wide basis this fall. So that even puts pressure, the wheat is going to put pressure on corn, and they're going to drag each other down, and the only variable that can really affect wheat now is beans. So I think you put wheat in the carry, sell the carry, store it, and be done.
If we don't have a weather event, which looks like we're not going to have a massive drought, how bad does basis scare you coming into fall?
Well, I mean, I just experienced some great basis because I sold some corn. Corn had rallied 14 cents and I sold it less than the week before. So like 50 some under basis already. So we did a harvest basis on this corn rally. So I would expect I'll probably see 50, 52 under. I won't sell anything there. But I mean, I didn't think we'd see that number, but we did. And then beans, when beans rallied, it was $1.20 under, and they even quit buying stuff. So it'll be negative towards fall. The crop's going to be big enough for sure.
So what about on the demand side of the ledger? I know that can't carry prices alone, but talk about China. Andy, the stockpiles, we know that they're releasing those. Is that permanent? That we're going to see them continue to kind of increase those stockpiles and what's going on there? What's the strategy?
What I think is going to happen is you artificially inflated bean demand in the South because they stored corn on a policy that they were doing. That policy is going away, so it's more free market. So that corn will get sold in the open market, which is a competitor as opposed to use. And they don't have the use built on the corn side because it was basically just like an insurance policy. Well, they don't want to get rid of that, and they're not going to pay for that anymore. So will they be buying corn on the open market? Possibly in the South and then selling stuff in the North. But I mean, you're going to see more trade and it'll be very ambiguous.
Okay, Bob, real quick though, China's proving to us no matter the economy, they're still going to buy, right?
They're still going to buy, which means if they build their demand and they build their stocks down and we reduce their acres, that sets the stage for 017, 018, someplace out there. That's why you want to buy the fall lows.
Okay, thank you both. We'll get their closing thoughts when we come back on U.S. Farm Report.
Receive a free trial of the Daily Market Letter and gain knowledge about current market conditions from the professionals at Bauer Trading. View the markets like never before. Go to BauerTrading.com.
Time for closing thoughts. Bob Etterbeck.
Old crop corn, get it moved, timely. Feed buyers, get prepared for the great opportunities this fall.
Okay, Andy?
I think corn's pretty cheap. If you get stuck having to sell old crop because you missed this last run, I would go all the way out and buy July futures for next year and forget about it. If we're trading in this 340, 350 area in corn, anything lower than that, you can own July futures and you're good.
But this week was depressing.
It was depressing, but not depressing if you're a bear.
If you're a bear.
This always happens.
But
markets go up, they go down.
Yeah.
We just went down and we'll go up again sometime.
And so the key is now, learn from this mistake, prepare for the next year, because this volatility is not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And say to yourself, how am I going to make a better amount? And the only way you can do it is have a plan, work the plan, and expect volatility is going to continue.
All right, thank you both for being here. Stay with us. John Phipps joins us when we come back. It's time now to head to John's farm for this week's John's World. From banks to Brexit, he's covering it all. John?
As more of us in rural America are discovering, small banks are being absorbed into larger, even huge banks. One common reason cited is the cost of increased regulation, especially the Dodd-Frank regulations put in place after the financial meltdown of the recession. This is a legitimate complaint, but not the whole or even major cause. Community banks had been disappearing for 30-odd years before Dodd-Frank. A 2014 study by the Federal Reserve System concluded 3/4 of the blame accrued to persistently low interest rates. Small banks depend on the spread between the cost of money which they pay to savers and the interest rate paid by borrowers. Simply put, it's a lot easier to find some profit when the rates on loans are 8% than when they're 4%. As the spreads shrank, banks were forced to do something farmers should identify with: get bigger. Just like more acres help farmers survive with lower profit margin, larger banks can have lower fixed costs to help them get by on lower spreads. The process became self-reinforcing as owners of small banks often sell out as they see the value of their bank as a business kind of going south. Rural banks also have formidable competition from the farm credit system, which does not depend on deposits but rather government-backed bonds to lower their cost of funds. As the FCS has grown, community banks have seen their market share threatened. Blaming the decline in community banks on simple market forces is less satisfying for many than pointing the finger at regulations. But even without regulations, I think the same process would be occurring, only with more outright bank failures. the recent financial market gyrations due to the UK Brexit vote, and the remarkable stability the financial market showed can be attributed in no small part to stronger regulations of banks, both here and abroad, especially the largest banks. A stable financial sector should not be sacrificed in a futile attempt to prevent market forces from reshaping our banks for a new low-interest future.
Thanks, John. Well, still to come, a battle for New York dairies to unionize is putting the dairy industry at odds with its governor. We'll break down the fight and why farmers say it just doesn't pencil out. That's after the break.
U.S.Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast. From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. We have much more ahead over the next half hour. It's a dairy divide in New York. Our Farm Journal report shows you why the industry is at odds over labor and customer support. With so much tension after John's customer support lately, he thinks it's time to remind us of the ground rules. And in Baxter Black, a debate between a father and son about that one cow you just can't let go. Now for the headlines. Despite the tumble in commodity prices this week, the spring rally lifted producers' optimism. The latest Ag Economy Barometer from Purdue and CME shows the index rising to 104 in June, a 7-point jump. The study notes the key reason for that in June was corn and soybean prices trading in ranges not seen in nearly a year. But even despite brighter outlooks, producers were more conservative on the outlook for their individual operation. Another interesting finding is more farmers anticipate extreme weather impacting their crop yields this year than last year. And nearly 30% surveyed said they revised their marketing plan due to worries about weather. A national labeling standard that would void Vermont's state law is now in its final steps of approval. The Senate passing the GMO labeling bill 63-30 on Thursday. Under the bill, meat and dairy products from animals fed feed containing GMO ingredients will be exempt from the rule. Now it's on to the House for a vote before heading to the president's desk. Now it won't be an easy ride. Any changes to the bill in the House will still need to be sent back to the Senate for approval. A new study from researchers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found consumers whose calorie intake is mainly from subsidized food have a higher chance of developing health problems. The researchers found food items like corn, soy, wheat, dairy, and meats are more likely to have higher cholesterol or be overweight. This could influence future political debates as researchers suggest federal agricultural policy should be more aligned with nutrition policy. There's more time to give your input on atrazine. EPA is extending the comment period deadline from August 5th to October 4th. The extension is after stakeholders said it's difficult to comment during the growing season. People are asked to weigh in on EPA's draft ecological risk assessment, claiming atrazine does harm the environment. The massive algae bloom outbreak shutting down Florida beaches and forcing a state of emergency is now being connected to agriculture. Army Corps of Engineers officials believe the algae blooms can be traced to Lake Okeechobee, which is the largest lake in Florida. Officials say the lake has been overloaded with excessive amount of fertilizer runoff from farms and urbanization. While they haven't been able to confirm the theory, officials say a recent sample of water from the beach matches a sample from the lake. An Iowa-based egg production company that's blamed for a massive salmonella outbreak 6 years ago is still coming under fire, and now the two owners could face jail time. In a 2-1 decision, a circuit court in Iowa backed a previous ruling that says Jack DeCoster and his son Peter should serve a prison sentence for misdemeanor food safety violations. The case claims the DeCosters were aware of unsanitary conditions at their Iowa farms, which sickened up to 56,000 people. The judge says the DeCosters disregarded basic food safety standards for years and deserved jail time. The Prestige Farm pork processing plant that was turned down by Mason City, Iowa officials has found a new home. Prestige Farms is building a $240 million plant in Wright County, Iowa. It's expected to bring in roughly 900 new jobs. Prestige told us at World Pork Expo he was contracted by 19 communities in the state of Iowa, as well as a half a dozen locations in other states for the plant.
Agriculture's National Forecast is sponsored by Yamaha's full line of real-world tough ATVs and side-by-side vehicles.
All right, that's it for the news. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us now with a longer-term look at weather. Mike, are you still thinking warm temperatures throughout July?
Absolutely, Tyne. The vast majority, if not all, of the lower 48 going to be above normal for temperatures as we head through the second half of July and even on into the first part of August. Let's start off with a jet stream. You can see the ridge over the eastern plains, Mississippi Valley, and that's bringing the heat back in after a quick cool down for the Great Lakes in the northeast over the weekend. That is going to change, obviously. Now, that ridge keeps moving. That slow-moving kind of cutoff area of low pressure across southern Canada will continue to move with the jet stream, and that kind of flattens out the ridge again. So you get the heat and humidity, then you go back down a little bit. However, southern tier of states, this looks like a situation where you just stay hot and humid right through the next week. So my 30-day outlook for temperatures above normal almost everywhere. I do have near normal for northern Minnesota, North Dakota, and the far southwest. Precipitation, this is a tough call. Above normal in the southeast, mainly for tropical stuff. Below normal parts of the Great Lakes and the west. Near normal is the best we can do at this point for most of the Corn Belt. Tyne?
Thanks so much, Mike. The New York State Farm Bureau is stepping into a legal fight over whether farm workers can be allowed to unionize. The New York Civil Liberties Union filed suit against the state and its governor earlier this year over a law that forbids collective bargaining for farm workers. The governor says he won't argue the lawsuit, sparking the New York Farm Bureau to ask the courts to intervene. In this Farm Journal report, Betsy Gibbon tells us why this fight is far from over.
Kendra Lamb is a dairy producer in western New York. For her, it's more than an occupation, but a passion.
It's a family legacy. It's something that my entire family is in dairy farming, and I really believe in what we do.
While rewarding, it's an industry that's going through challenges from too much milk to declining prices. But Lamb says labor and regulations are top of mind.
We're really struggling with a consistent labor supply and also with some of the regulations and things that are coming at us from the government in the New York State.
One topic has been heating up in New York. The New York Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit against the state of New York, saying farm workers not having the ability to unionize is unconstitutional. Currently, the New York Constitution guarantees workers the right to unionize, but that state law excludes agricultural workers. Governor Andrew Cuomo says his administration will not fight the lawsuit.
And what we feel is really a lot of anger from within the industry because we feel we do a really good job at taking care of our workers, and we don't feel that there is a need for farm workers to have to unionize.
In a release, the New York Civil Liberties Union states enough is enough. Farm workers who we depend on to put food on our tables deserve no less dignity and humanity than any other hardworking New Yorker. Also, a Farm Workers Fair Labor Practices Act is floating through the state's legislature. It's now in the state's legislative committee. It could require 1 day of rest a week, ensuring an overtime rate of time and a half, and grants collective bargaining rights to farm workers.
There's a push for overtime pay and also for unionization of dairy farm workers, and those are going to make it really, really hard for us to do business because we are price takers. We don't get to choose how much we're paid for our milk.
12 states allow collective bargaining, and 4 states in the U.S. have overtime provisions for farm workers. Vance Lake says farmers offer good wages, good benefits packages, and a place to work. Sometimes that includes housing as well as other bonuses.
Our concern is that our workers won't really understand what collective bargaining really means. So it will be an added expense to them to join a labor union, and then we're not sure what kind of benefit it will really bring to them.
Farm Credit East in New York says farmers there are already paying workers above normal averages. For every $100 of production sold, New York farmers paid $14.20 to farm workers. The U.S. average is $8.50. Those in the ag industry say a stable labor force is critical.
Vegetables, fruits need to be harvested in a very small window. And so if workers were to strike, farms would lose crops. From the dairy perspective, our concern is that our cows need to be cared for 24/7. Animal health is a priority on all of our farms. So if we don't have workers to care for our cows or to milk our cows, now we have animal health issues.
All potential challenges impacting dairy, an industry Lamb loves so much. Reporting in Western New York, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. And the lawsuit was filed on behalf of a farm worker who was fired from his job at a dairy farm after discussing working conditions with other employees after his shift. The claims say he worked 12-hour shifts 6 days a week and was forced to go without medical care after getting injured. Next up, John Phepps.
Time to go over the ground rules again.
Well, it's no secret that John's presidential commentary stirred up quite the debate, and with so much tension, John is taking us back a few years and talking about the basics. John?
Your call is very important to us. Please hold.
From Tom Kalkman in Montrose, Colorado, regarding my candidate comments. Wait a minute. You can't just read responses from Fox News biased Republicans without checking and disputing factually unsupported statements, or at least presenting the opposing Democratic view. Seems like a blatant ploy by the show's producers to court right-wing viewers. If I remember correctly, your editorial concerned which candidate would be better for agriculture, and you then presented arguments for a candidate based upon that premise. Your views are what the segment is all about. Presenting politically biased views as a counterpoint from unvetted viewers is disingenuous. Thanks, Tom. From your email and several others, I've decided we need to review the ground rules for both John's World and customer support. My job as an independent contractor with Farm Journal is to offer opinions and analysis of ag topics. Just like our market gurus saying they think corn will go down, I offer my best judgment on other topics. In neither case are those opinions Farm Journal policy. Think of the op-ed page in a newspaper. USFR producers have no input to my segments. However, they have the right not to broadcast a segment. That's never happened, but it could. I choose the responses from viewers. I edit only for length and obvious typos. I do not, as a rule, respond point by point, since I've already had my say. Other viewers can, however, as you have done. In agriculture, using terms like right-wing is tricky. Most farmers may be far more conservative than I on policies like environmental regulations, for example, but are essentially socialist on farm subsidies. Labels just don't help that much. I seldom show feedback that agrees with my position because that seems both self-serving and redundant. On topics like this election, that may give a one-sided sense of audience reaction, but I don't see any practical alternative. You can always read all the feedback in original form on our website, and that will give you a much better idea of what others are thinking. I have 2 minutes for each segment. While I do run slightly long from time to time just to drive time crazy, that's not a lot of time for complex topics, so I cannot speak to every factual controversy. I do note such disputed points and often address them in future editorials. Finally, I intend to do everything I can to continue to make those who disagree with me know their opinions are heard, and I reserve the right to be persuaded to another point of view. We are in danger of losing the ability to debate crucial policy publicly. I believe not trying to do so, however, is our worst option.
Thanks, John. And remember, if you have a question or comment for John, you can email us or send us a note on Facebook and Twitter. Up next, we're heading out west for a visit with Baxter Black. This week, we head out west for a cute story from Baxter Black about that one cow you just can't let go.
Some farms and ranches treasure the fact that they have spanned several generations. They're celebrated for their fidelity to the land. But I expect, as the years went by, there's been many an argument over the type of cattle that they should be running to keep up with the times. You're not gonna keep her still, are you, Dad? She must be 12 years old. I reckon she's closer to 14 now and naturally half-polled. You mean she was sired by a hornless bull? No, she just got one horn, which makes her half-polled, or better yet, makes her half-unicorn. She could be half-clam if your logic's right. I mean, clams don't have any teeth. You're changing the subject. We're talking about horns, and one, she wasn't bequeathed. She could be half-deer and just shed one of them off while grazing through the wire. And checking this eye, man might conclude that a cyclops was her sire. Oh, and her stumbling skip is like a circus horse always taking a bow. Son, you're overlooking her greatest trait. Well, she's a gated cow. Let's see, a half-pole cyclops with teeth like a clam, a gated cow to boot. Hey, why don't you start a new registered breed? Call it the Rudy Toot. Yeah, half the pink eye, more room at the bunk, and easier to ride. Rudy Toot breeders will flock to your door. Dad, don't you have any pride? You're only looking to find an excuse to keep her on the place. I'll have you know, I make my decisions on cost in every case. And while you were babbling and rattling on trying to vilify, I decided to keep her one more year. And you're the reason why. Because being the practical man that I am, I say, waste not, want not. See, I saw you give her that vitamin A, and I'd hate to waste that shot. This is Baxter Black from out there.
You can hear more of Baxter's humor online at BaxterBlack.com. Well, when we come back, Machinery Pete joins us for Tractor Tales this week. Please stay with us.
Time now for Tractor Tales with Machinery Pete, the most trusted name in farm equipment.
Welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. Coming at you this week from southern Georgia. And look what we found. An amazing collection of classic John Deere tractors. Now, of all these beauties, there's one in particular that has a special place in the heart of the owner.
Little 330 John Deere came from Louisiana. Never, when I bought it, had never been painted and still had the original tires on it. Bought it off an auction down there, and the man had bought it from a farmer about 4 years before that. And when I went back the next morning to pick it up, I asked him if he had any information about it. And he went inside and brought the bill of sale out when that tractor was sold new. I think the man paid something like $3,200 for the tractor, new equipment, all the equipment to go with it, and traded a Cub foam all with all equipment in on it, and he had full payments, $600 and something 3 years and $700 something 1 year. He drove it 40 years and sold it to the man I bought it off the auction from. I think he said $2,400 what he paid the man for it. Like I said, never been painted, it didn't look good, it didn't have a muffler on it, had too much oil in it, and I never heard it run when I bought it. Brought it home, put me a muffler on it, changed the oil in it, cranked it up, and had a rod in it knocking. So I got to rebuild the motor then. I drove it in 2 parades without a hood. I put me a sign up on the side of it, said, run out of money, needs a sponsor. The boy that did the hood from me, it took him about 2 years to do the hood. Of course, he didn't charge me much. It was related to me, and so he done it on his off time. So I wasn't complaining about it taking so long, but after I wanted it in the parade, so that's what I did. I made me a sign for each side and just said, run out of money, can't fix the hood, I need somebody to sponsor to help me. Gonna redo one, you got to put tires on it. It looks tacky to put a paint job on one with raggedy tires, so it's just one thing will lead to another. And I enjoy doing it. It's just, like I said, it's an expensive hobby.
Thanks so much for that. Well, today's Country Church Salute goes to the North Bend Presbyterian Church in the small town of North Bend, Wisconsin. They tell us it's near the scenic Black River, and this year the church is celebrating 150 years. The celebration happens on September 17th, honoring past generations. Congratulations and thanks to Byron and Jennifer Kruger for sharing their story. Also, before we go, we want to run a correction to last week's Country Church Salute. The First Baptist Church in Norburn, Missouri was founded in 1870 and still has a strong foundation in their small farming town today. Well, if you have a church that you'd like to share, that can be sent to the address on the screen or on Facebook or Twitter. Stay with us. Crop Watch is next.
Find your next piece of farm equipment with Machinery Pete. Visit and shop on machinerypete.com today with more than 100,000 listings for sale.
Well, from drought to rain, we're covering it all this week. Mike, let's start out in Nebraska, where Jay tells us some powerful storms just ripped across the state this week. He says his corn got hammered, and here's a picture for proof. He's in northern Adams County, and while they are still assessing the damage, he says, Mike, it looks like several thousand acres were hit with hail just in his area.
That's a lot. Michael Clark captured this video on the south side of Indianapolis near Franklin. He says it was almost like a microburst as fields just across from that one were untouched. Winds topped 50 miles per hour, but some of the stalks weren't just goosenecked, but completely snapped in two.
Hate to hear that.
No doubt.
Well, in Marcellus, Michigan, Ryan captured this gorgeous sunset picture. He says he'd much rather watch a storm roll in right now because they are very dry,
Yeah,
Mike,
that's
as
very
we
true.
know. Yeah, but it still made for a beautiful night. And this week's drought monitor showed how bad those Michigan fields could really use a drink.
And from our friends to the north, Andy says if Norfolk County, Ontario was in Iowa, we'd probably see a rally in the corn market. Look at that pineapple corn. That looks awful. Desperately needing a drink.
Yeah.
Andy tells us they only received 7/10 of an inch of rain the entire month of June. That would hurt any part of the crop, no matter where you live.
And someone mentioned this is U.S.Farm Report, so why are we showing pictures of Canada? But we have to show our friends up there some love, and they could use...
We have viewers, Southern
Yes,
Canada,
yes.
a lot of them.
They could use a drink, so we hope you get one. Well, as always, we want to hear from you. You can send comments to mailbag@usfarmreport.com or check us out on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us at U.S. Farm Report, I'm Ty Morgan. Thank you for watching. Be sure to join us again right here next week as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
High-strength steel for high-strength dependability. Chevy Silverado, the official news-gathering vehicle of U.S. Farm Report. U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.